What is going on, you guys? This is Brandon from Comics Kings. Welcome back to the kingdom, or welcome if you're new. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up on your way in. Subscribe if you guys are new for more comic book content, for more creative interviews, more comic book reviews, and just more fun conversations that we have every day here on the channel. I want to take the time to shout out AWA for making this happen. Today, we are sitting down with Gregg Hurwitz, the creator of Knighted, making his return to comic books. I'm super excited for this. This was one of my favorite books that has come out as of late. Greg, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And if you guys want more information on AWA to see more of their amazing books, make sure you guys check out the descriptions in the link below. You can find all of Greg's links, all of AWA's links. They have a lot of cool stuff coming out with amazing writers from classic Marvel tales of the early 2000s that are my favorites. So I can't push that enough. We're not here to talk about Marvel. We're here to talk about AWA. Greg, I know you took a hiatus from comic books. What actually brought you back into it?
You know, really, it was the formation of AWA. The only editor who I worked with at Marvel was Axel Alonso. And when Axel talked about building a creative forward new publishing company, you know, he asked me to come join and be on the creative council for it. And I realized that I'd have an opportunity to come back and do creator-owned work, which I hadn't done. I had a great time writing for Marvel and DC. I got to write all my favorite characters, you know, Punisher, Wolverine, Moon Knight, Batman. And basically at the end of that run, I felt like I didn't have a lot more that I wanted to say about these characters. I felt like I got in, I was treated really well by Marvel and DC. I was treated really well by the fans. And I felt like I'd kind of done what I needed to say. And then Axel called and was like, hey, do you want to do your own thing? And I'd always had this idea for Knighted in the back of my head. And so I had a chance to just lay it out.
Right. And definitely having that fan base from the big two is also really rewarding when you already kind of get to dabble in Batman, get to dabble in Moon Knight, dabble in Wolverine, characters that already have those fan base. You can kind of pull that in.
That's right. And obviously there's a lot of homages and reference points to those creators.
Speaking of homages, we got a Dark Knight Returns cover. What got you doing? What about that is special to this book?
Well, look, when I was growing up, my favorite alias for a superhero was Peter Parker. You know, look, I was super into comics. I'd say like 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade was when it was like all that I was doing almost. And I loved Peter Parker because he was a kid. He was real. He was relatable, right? He was worried about quotidian stuff. Like, you know, he'd tear his costume. How's he going to tear his, how's he going to get that fixed? He's worried about disappointing his parental figures. He's worried about dealing with social pressures at school. And so he was so relatable to me, kind of wise ass, right? Like, you know, good cracking sense of humor. But the character who I always wanted to be was Batman. You know, the pinnacle of human perfection. It's the best that anyone can reach based on discipline. He's also like a Renaissance man, right? He's got spiritual component to what he does. He's tech savvy, right? He's an amazing hand-to-hand combatant, all these other things. And so I always thought about, what if I took my two favorite characters, right, Peter Parker and Batman, and thought about, what if Peter Parker accidentally, a character not unlike Peter Parker, though Bob's quite different in a number of ways, as you know,
right,
killed a character who is not unlike Knighted or the Knight, and he had to fill his shoes. Like, what would that combination of people be like? Because, you know, Bruce Wayne's pretty cool. So the transition from Bruce Wayne to Batman makes more sense. And you'll notice on Knighted, the icon that the Knight has on his chest is a yin yang. It's
right.
about integrating the two parts, darkness and light. And so that to me is sort of the scope of comics. You go all the way from a Peter Parker to a Batman.
Right. And I would say in that kind of yin and yang, you see a lot of similarities, just going off the top of my head, between Spider-Man and Batman. You know, Spider-Man has a lot of darkness in him. It's just he's always going to turn that and show the light. You know, Spider-Man's a character of great turmoil. Batman's also a character of great turmoil. It's just the way that they show their darkness are in two different landscapes, two different spectrums of comics, which is great about the characters. You know, I did get a lot of Spider-Man vibes or Peter Parker vibes from Bob. Let's actually talk about that. So if you were to before we talk about the book, if you were to give a pitch for anyone who has not read Knighted, what is the pitch?
Well, the pitch is, you know, I always start with the first scene. I always like starting with a scene instead of a summary. And I had the scene in my head. I've had this scene in my head, Brandon, for like 10 years. And it's a guy on his knee holding an engagement ring open. He's in a fancy restaurant. His girlfriend is looking on breathlessly. The whole restaurant's paused and watching it. And we cut back to her. And the first word in this comic is no. She doesn't want to marry him. And the waiter's holding the champagne, the cork pops. It's this hugely awkward moment. And basically this is Bob, right? He's kind of a bit of a doormat. He's a good guy. We like him a lot. He's very kind. He's a gentler soul. But basically, he's a civilian crime analyst who works in a cop station with real cops who have real badges and do real stuff. And he's always sort of a day late and a dollar short. And so basically this is the worst night of his life. He steps outside the restaurant. He takes the ring with him. It gets stolen. He has to show up and report the theft at his very own precinct where all the detectives already think he's kind of a loser. And then on his way walking home, he spies a rope that's tied to, a gas main that's going to burst and put a lot of people at risk. And he unties it. There's a crash around the corner. He runs into the alley and he sees that he's inadvertently killed the Knight, the city's only superhero. And he gets basically whisked away and has to figure out, what is he going to do? The city, without the superhero, the city's going to tear itself to pieces. And so what if he has to fill those shoes? What if he has to don the cowl and fill the boots and take over and be a better version of himself in order to hold the city together? And that's the challenge. Can somebody who's fundamentally a nice guy step into himself in a different kind of way?
Right, 100%. I felt like the ending was kind of like a symbiotic takeover, kind of like what we saw, the transition from Peter to Eddie in ASM 300. Or $2.99, whatever you want to, $2.99. Yeah. If you ask everyone else, it's $2.99. If you ask whatever eBay price, it's $300. But I definitely got a lot of those vibes, and it was really cool to see these relationships kind of form and to really feel for Bob's situation, right? We've all kind of had those toxic work environments. So that kind of leads me into my next question. How has AWA been treating you? Like, what's probably the best thing about coming back to comic books?
Well,
I get your own thing.
I have, being on the creative council, I just have a ton of creative latitude. It's been great. And so the ability I have the opportunity I have to just think up something that I want to do and just sit down and do it, to build my own world, and thank God we got to Shara. He's amazing. I wanted a big, knockdown world building superhero. His Ghost Rider is my favorite. I love the way he depicted that. That was a big reason we reached out to him. And so I just wanted to build out this whole world and have a, top of the A-list artist helping me do it. Right. And helping, he designed the costume. There's a lot of give and take. And, when you get an artist as good as him, you want to give him a lot of elbow room. And so it's been wonderful. And the one thing for me that's been really fun with this is Knighted is there's more humor in it than in any comic that I've written. I always like having humor as a part of it, but it's really front and center in Knighted. There's a lot that I hope people find amusing. And one thing that was really cool was seeing with Teixeira, he's so adept at portraying humorous facial expressions, body postures, creating moments. His storytelling isn't just the action and the suspense and the big spectacle badassery. He really knows how to get those human moments in a way that's really compelling.
Right. And kind of building up, especially when you're doing a creator-owned book. One of the most difficult things that I find as a reader in them is when you just jump right into the story and you don't take that time to world build, you don't take that time to give your characters those human moments, because the benefits of writing in the big two. Everyone knows the characters. Unless you're creating a new character, you're bringing Null in, you're bringing in any new character, Miles Morales. No one's really going to know their name until they become household, right? So when an indie book, when you kind of make that the norm, right? These characters, and you'll remember their name by the end of the book. I find that to be a huge success, and I got that in this book. So thank you very much for that. I'm also a big fan of Teixeira's Ghost Rider. That was the first Ghost Rider story. Your mic is muted again. It was probably the first Ghost Rider story that I've read. And then, of course, I read everything after. So I really much...
Having a key artist to go into creating a new world is amazing. I mean, I always liked having somebody in hand, like I always leaned heavily on my artists. When I was
Right.
did Batman the Dark Knight, I went literally, it was like David Finch, Ethan Van Sciver, Alex Maleev, and my last comic I did was illustrated by Neil Adams. And it was like, it's hard to get through a run of artists who are better than that, of living comic book artists. It was just an amazing span that I had. And so it was really important to me to have that. And what was interesting is a lot of the work I did at DC was reinventing the villains for the New 52. I did the Penguin, I did Mad Hatter, we did Clayface. And so there was some opportunity for that give and take. But as you say, with the big two, everybody knows what they're getting. They have a kind of template. There's only so far that you can go and push it. And what was amazing with this is we had the whole world open to us. So when I sat down to face the blank page, first it's like, what city do I want? What alias do I want? What job should he have? Who does he live with? What's his family? Where's he come from? What's his sense of humor? What's he look like? I mean, everything's up for grabs. And that was really fun. And it was also, really rewarding once Teixeira got in there to have somebody who's just such a pro, to step in and really like develop and build out that world in visually.
Right. And I noticed, I was rereading Moon Knight today, refreshing my memory for all this. And I was like, you're really leaning on Jerome Opeña, who is a fantastic artist in his own right.
Yeah. He was amazing. He was something else to work with also.
Right. So I've noticed that you were very dependent on your artist to kind of take that creativity to the next level. In this book, how tight are you with your scripts, or did you allow Teixeira to kind of do some wiggle room, change a few things?
Well, look, I lay it out very clearly. I'm pretty meticulous about the page count, what angles and perspectives I want. But when you work with a talent like Mark, I want him to figure out how he can do what I've suggested better, right? A comic script, in some ways, it's an invitation to collaborate, right? And so Mark is, we saw eye to eye on it, which was great. It's not like he was veering off in some other direction, but these little enhancements, the moments he would bring, the ability to know, in the last issue, I had something that I did in one panel. I just proofread the second issue. We just got that in with all the lettering. And, awesome. That's an issue. There was a moment that he took one panel and turned it into three. And it's so much more dramatic, like three small panels in the space of one.
Right.
And so I want him to do all that because, that's what he does. That's why he's hired. He's not, he's an artist. And so I want him being at the top of his game, him having more creative latitude. All that happens when he does that is he makes me look like a better writer.
Oh yeah, that's always the best feeling. It's like, oh no, it's all them, but you're doing a great job as well. So it's definitely a great 50-50. Would you say you guys are at your highest right now than where you were at Marvel back in the day?
In terms of my work, or
and towards like how you guys are elevating these plots and putting out the best quality stories?
I see. Well, one thing that's interesting for me is like when I came back, there's an aspect to it that's a little bit I'm playing with the form, right? So when people read Knighted, they're going to understand that there's all these references to Batman, to Peter Parker, to Moon Knight, right? And I'm playing within the world of comics, but I'm not doing it the way that some people do, which is like, I feel like some people are kind of tourists in comics. Like they weren't hardcore comic geeks. They don't love the form. And you see it a lot at like, sometimes out here in Hollywood where people are like dipping in because it's trendy at something else. And so they're coming up with these variations. And for me, I wanted to write this different sort of take into an origin story, but I do it from a place of like, really deep love and affection for comics and for the form. And so as much as I'm taking apart aspects of the origin story and, shining them and putting them back together differently and playing around with them, the baseline of it is, it's being written by somebody who loved and wrote Moon Knight, who loved and wrote Batman. I even snuck Spider-Man. I had him swing through an issue of Moon Knight so I could write him when I was at Marvel. And so I think, I hope that comes across. And with Teixeira too, it's not like we're doing this sort of snide, snarky take on comics, but it's got a lot to it. And the comics that are successful that play with the form like that all have that. They're from Millar, they're from Garth Ennis, right? They're from people who genuinely love and have
a great love for the storytelling, for the volume that you guys work in. And it's really funny that you're talking about integrating the origin, which was a very key part of the book that I enjoyed, and how different the perspective is. a lot of times when writers in current, let's say, indie books are going on, it's very tropey, but a lot of times in writing, it's how you can take those tropes and make it your own. How can you make people not really see the trope as clearly as
Right.
others? And I actually thought this origin story was right on par with Robert Kirkman with Invincible. I enjoyed it that much.
Wow. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
that's high praise, and how Kirkman kind of took the Superman trope and the Spider-Man trope and made Mark Grayson, kind of establish him as the character first, ahead of the powers, ahead of everything else. The biggest part is getting attached to the person.
Right. Yeah, if you
So
don't have those human moments, if you don't have a sense of the character, I mean, and that's again the things that Stan Lee was amazing at, as we're talking about that early Spider-Man stuff. If you can't feel a connection to the character, if you can't empathize with where he is, it doesn't matter. Then you're just reading action,
Right. So let's talk about Bob a little bit. Can you get into his backstory for us? I know you touched on it in the beginning, but let's get a little bit more in depth and get people knowing about the character.
Well, so he's somebody, like I said, his girlfriend, Kendall, when she tells him why she doesn't want to marry him, she says, I want you, but better. She says, you're a civilian crime analyst in a station with real cops. She says, basically you're middle management in a field with no upper management. Like there's no promotion. He's sort of stuck as a civilian crime analyst. He's stuck with Kendall in their relationship. And the other piece for me that was amusing was that Kendall, his girlfriend, or his who he hoped would be his fiance, her father is actually the police commissioner, but he doesn't help Bob at all because he thinks Bob should earn his own way. But everyone at the station feels like that Bob did get all this help, right? That he did get all this altruistic attention. And so he's stuck in all these ways in this web of perceptions, a lot of which are wrong, a lot of which he struggles to sort of fill his own shoes, let alone the shoes of the knight. And I think the one place we really see him in his element is when he's with his family. He comes from a family of a lot of sisters. He's got a nephew named Javi, who he's very close with. We're going to meet a lot more of them in the upcoming issues. And he's basically just like a fundamentally good guy. And one of the questions I wanted to answer in this is, people say nice guys finish last. Is there a way that he can stay a nice guy, but learn some of the hardness and boundaries and find his own voice in a way that he doesn't have to finish last?
Right. And, nice guys don't finish last, but they do play the long game. We're kind of obligated to play the long game. It's not like I can walk up and say, hey, come home with me. No, I got to play like 5 years down the road if I'm ever going to do anything. But we'll get there eventually. It's really great that we have these kind of humanizing moments. What was your biggest inspiration? Like if you were to like kind of, I know there's a big homage to DKR in here, but were there other stories that really drove you to tell this?
Well, Dark Knight is obviously huge. That was just a huge part of it. And I was influenced pretty heavily having written on the Dark Knight comic, which, Finch started. I came in and did my first run with Finch where we kind of recreated the Scarecrow for the New 52. But, a lot of the aesthetics of that drew pretty heavily on the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy. And so that's a big part of it, too, from the world of film, because you see all these ways that it seeps in. I remember when I did one of my first Wolverines was just after Hugh Jackman had played the role, and you can see Wolverine starts to look a bit more like him in the comics. And
right.
So that sort of darker aesthetic was really interesting to me. But then, as you put earlier, with that face to the light, the face to the sun that we think of with Spider-Man. But of course, I'm dealing with this in an older man. Bob's not Peter Parker. He's not a high school kid.
I mean, Peter Parker pre-Brand New Day.
Yeah. Right. And so it's this very interesting contrast between light and shadow, which of course is the yin yang. And so that was a big part of the motifs I was playing with.
100%, man. So let's kind of talk about the other books that AW has. Which one's been your favorite so far, if you had to choose?
I really like Hotel a lot.
Hotel.
Yeah. And I love Garth Ennis. I mean, so, Garth's, the temporal criminal. I mean, Marjorie Finnegan, it's just a blast. I mean, he's so unusual and so distinctive and so funny. One of my first jobs in comics when I did The Punisher was I took over after his legendary run on Marvel Max. I basically established Marvel Max. And that run was so seminal for me in some ways because it showed me as an adult. By then I'd written, a bunch of novels. I'd had a bit of success. Right. And it showed me what comics could do from a fully adult perspective for the first time, as he was part of my re-entry into comics again as a fan. And so it was a really special moment for me when I got to take over. He was done with his run on the Punisher, and I came and stepped in and got to do the next arc after that. So I always love reading Ennis. I'll read anything he does.
Right. So I know you do like to take on grittier characters. I know you're a big fan of action. What can you say going forward into this book? Are there going to be similar parallels to what we've seen in Moon Knight, what we've seen in your Batman?
There's going to be some serious villain building, as there was in a lot of my work with DC. And there's going to be some of that, levity and spectacle that I tried to bring to my work at Marvel. So, again, that's going to be the combination of the two, and with an undercurrent. But what I also wanted was, this is set in the world that, the foundation that Straczynski really masterfully poured for our shared universe, right? So it takes place there. But I also wanted this to be a story that can stand on its own 2 feet. And so as much as it exists in that world, I think somebody can come in having not read all the other AWA books and just pick it up and read it as its own sort of standalone series also. And so if you're a fan of the world of AWA, which more and more people are, we're getting more people kind of feeding into all the creative that we're kind of building out. There's lots of Easter eggs, right? There's lots of little references and crossovers. And it was fun talking to Straczynski about that as we laid some of the pipe for this. And if you're not, you can sit down and read it cold. And my hope is it's all there for you also.
100%. That is really cool. I kind of was putting the pieces there together. I'm a little bit newer to AWA, and I've been loving everything that I've been consuming lately. It's been on the top of my reading pile. So you guys,
I'm glad to hear that.
You guys are just making my wallet say mean things to me. That just did not come from a Dr. Seuss book. But it's been JMS is one of my personal favorites. I think his Spider-Man is my favorite of his, which kind of hard not to be with everything else that he's done. What is the big teaser for issue 2 that we can look for?
Well, look, issue 2, we're going to find the challenge. The gauntlet has been thrown down, right? Bob is gone. He knows the shape that the city's in. He knows that there's big shoes to fill. And the question is, what's he going to do? And issue 2 is going to find him having a strong instinct to run away from it. And the question is going to be, are events going to overtake him, right? That won't allow him to run away from this thing that increasingly feels like it's part of his destiny.
Right, 100%. By the way, we have a lot of people in the chat right now. If anybody does have a question for Greg, make sure you guys drop it below. If you guys are enjoying Night Eater, what is your favorite AWA book? Again, make sure you guys like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I do want to say today's also for the PCP Army Bad Batch. Today was our big tribute to Sam's Tangled Web, who has recently passed. The show before ours on Big Herb's channel was a tribute. So if you guys missed that, I highly recommend you go check that out. Also check out everything else we have to offer. For all the way 11 o'clock with Nick, we got Travis up today with our good friend Flash, and then we had Herb. And now after this at 9 o'clock, we're gonna go over to Tomorrow Cinema, and they're gonna be talking with other indie creators over on his channel. Greg, quick question. We have a little bit more time. What is DKR your favorite Batman story? If you were to pick a second, which would it be?
Oh boy. I gravitate so much to the villains, and I gotta say, I still love the Killing Joke. Yes. And part of when I left Marvel and went to DC, they offered me kind of, a broad range. They said, what do you want to do if you come over to DC? And I said, I want to write a Penguin origin story. And I was sitting down with Dan Didio, and he looked at me like I was crazy. It was like, really, out of everything in DC you could ask for. And God bless him, he let me do that. I got an incredible artist, Szymon Kudranski, Polish artist, who just killed it. And my reason for it was that what's interests me in the Batman's Rogues Gallery is that Penguin is the only one who's sane out of everybody. Joker's crazy, obviously. The Riddler's crazy. And if you're the Penguin, then Batman is actually the bad guy. And so it was really interesting to me. A lot of that was influenced from the Killing Joke. I wanted to give him a substantial foundation to be viewed differently from just the 70s TV show. I wanted to make the Penguin real. And so a lot of the inspiration I drew from that was from Alan Moore.
100%. Killing Joke is probably my favorite of all time. We're actually getting ready to do a show about our top 5 Batman books, and it's hard it's really hard for me to not put the Killing Joke at that number 1 slot just because of how it affected the whole Batman universe. You know, we're still dealing with the ramifications of everything that happened in that story.
Yeah. And you know what else I really loved The Long Halloween.
Yes. I have not seen the animated for that yet, either part. I was going to watch it during Halloween, and it just completely slipped my mind, and I started reading, and I went to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, Loeb Sale did some fantastic stuff.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of meeting Tim Sale a few years ago. For Detective Comics 1000, I got a blank cover, and I had artists do little sketches on it. And Tim Sale did a Robin, Dick Grayson, as little baby Robin.
I love his work a lot.
Oh, yeah.
He's somebody who I didn't have a chance to work with, but I admire him a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I bought almost everything he's done.
Right, 100%. We got a lot of people in the chat showing a lot of love for everything that's going on with what you guys are doing. You know, Tashara is a fantastic artist. You're a fantastic writer. This is a book you guys should not be missing out on. Again, for more information, check out the description below. AWA, all of their information, their website, all the previews for their titles are in the description. Make sure you guys check that out. If you guys want more creative from AWA, make sure you guys give this a thumbs up. Share it out to all your friends, right? That way we can really promote this book. Greg, thank you so much for being here, man. I really had a blast having you on.
I appreciate you having me on. It's nice to meet you and all your crew. You got a good fan base here, so it's always fun talking to people who love comics.
Always, man. And I could not do this without my 2 co-hosts with the channel. We got Hillbilly Comics here and Missing Link, always in the chat. They're always on streams. Couldn't do the show without them, you guys. We are nearing a couple announcements here. We are nearing 500. I know a lot of people have been telling me that I've been nearing 500. I did not know it came up this quickly because I don't really look at my subs. But thank you guys for your support, for sharing everything. Tomorrow we are dropping... What do we drop tomorrow? We're dropping a breakdown of all the Disney Plus announcements, so stay tuned for that. That should be dropping. I'll try to get it out in the afternoon, try to release that. And then Friday, we are going to be interviewing Marv Wolfman, which is going to be a fantastic experience, creating one of my favorite characters, Nightwing. Huge fan of that. And then on Saturday, I believe we are going to be releasing our Hawkeye review of by Matt Fraction, David Aja, getting ready for the show, which I'm really stoked about. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Also, we do have merch, so if you guys do want hoodies, t-shirts, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. I know many guys have, and we'll get you set up for that. Other than that, we do have Manny coming up at 9 o'clock. Greg, again, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care, you guys.